Well, thank you very much. First of all, I'm a little nervous to have two great people over here and to talk about cinema, which is obviously not something that I know enough about. Thankfully, we are going to be discussing one part of cinema, which is to do with the issue that we are dealing with today, and that's about the gender issue. So obviously, my questions are going to be more about that. And through this day, we have had a little bit of bashing as far as advertising is concerned, but we handle it well because we came in with white flags to say that, yes, we are guilty. So I'm going to start off as a general question to you and to you as well, which is to basically understand what is your view about the fact that we have put this title as, cinema shapes society. And we know that it does have a very major role, and we know that Tamil cinema, for instance, has played a major role as far as the caste system is concerned. So what's your view on that as today's cinema? Do you think, is that something which is a priority, it's something that should be looked at?
Before I go into your question, I'd like to make a couple of statements. You see, any mass media, whether you like it or not, film is mass media, part of mass media. One of the things about film is that whatever you do, the basic idea is to entertain people. And in order to entertain people, one of the things that you have to do normally is to see that you don't alienate people, so that they are engaged with what you're doing. And the process of that engagement, you prefer that process of engagement to be passive, because then there is no response that is against what you're doing or anti-you what you're doing. When you start to do things like that, automatically one of the things that happens is that you would be reflecting largely everything that society generally tends to believe. All the prejudices, all the attitudes, the aspirations, all of those things come into play. Now, in a situation like this, if you wish to change anything at all, the only way you can do it is by subverting it. You see, you can't do it without subverting. So when you have to look at the whole thing, now we are looking at the paradigm of patriarchy in which we are operating, all of us. Now, that paradigm hasn't changed. You're still in the same paradigm. Within that paradigm, you're saying, what can we do, what we cannot do? Because I heard the previous session also. So all of them, it's really what one is attempting to do is make little changes here and little changes there and so on. The basic problem is, can you change the paradigm itself? Because ultimately, what is the problem? You want to change the paradigm. It's like saying if 50% of men in the world and 50% are women, then why is it the half of the world doesn't belong to women? Why should even that belong to men? So that's the question, really. So if that is the question, how are you going to deal with it in entertainment? But because patriarchal systems dominate, even within the patriarchy, you look at women-centered films. Do they work? By and large, they can work if they're allowed to work. How many people get money to make women-centered films? How many male stars will work in a film if you're going to tell a story in which the woman is going to be the center of the story? Would that happen easily? Doesn't happen. We all know that. Now, the most successful film that was ever made, which was a woman-centered film, was Mother India. And that was within the paradigm of patriarchy. So, and all the values that the patriarchal system says should be the kind of strengths of a woman were shown in that. Right. All right. Now, but nothing else. Clearly, that is your picture. Now, all of us have tried to do films. Now, my very first film was a woman-centered film. Now, I was trying to subvert, quite honestly. Similarly, when I made Bhoomika, it was an actual case of straightforward subversion. Now, when that film was made, that film failed. In 2 days, it disappeared. when it was released the first time, because most people didn't realize that this was a film essentially beamed to women. It was when it was released the third time, in those days it was possible. Today you can't do this with any film. But in the days when I made that film in 1976, when that film was released, first time it went, second time it ran for a week, third time it went for 25 weeks. Right. Now, the reason for that was because the audiences that made that film successful was entirely women. It was women and they taking their families to the film that made that film a success. Otherwise, it wouldn't have worked. And I cannot give many examples like Bhoomika that have been made in the film industry where you say that here I'm dealing with a subject which is not in relationship. You know, the relationships are always, in her case, negative. The kind of relationships she has, you will always find that the men have a tendency to fall short. You know, now, you cannot deal with films like this because these are things that happen in life, right? But it's not always easy to do that. So when you think in terms of how are you going to deal with it, so you have to say that if I am going to function in popular cinema, I have to accept patriarchy as the basis of which, and if I want to change, make him certain kinds of changes, I would have to see how I can do it. Like say, for example, she made a film recently in which there is one action, which for me was a very interesting action, where the Katrina Kaif at the end of the film chases after this boy and she kisses him. And then goes, that's it. That's the end of it. But it's not a reactive thing, but she's acting out of her own. Otherwise, you always have women characters reacting to everybody else. Because in any case, they're defined in those terms. They're defined as somebody's daughter, somebody's girlfriend, somebody's mother, somebody's wife, somebody's mother-in-law, daughter-in-law.
Well, actually, that's a question that I'm going to ask Zoya, which is that being a woman and being a writer, and of course, this reference to, the stereotype of a woman that she's supposed to be doing exactly what is correct, that is kind of led in a way by a man. You have been able to break that. So how has it been for you with that?
I think in at least 95, if not more, % of mainstream cinema, I don't think anybody is represented correctly. Whether it's men, women, homosexuals, disabled, communities, minorities, nobody has a proper representation. So just to say women are not, why will women be represented properly? Nobody is. It's all skewed. Yeah, you take men; they are all they're heroes. When I keep getting asked to how your industry really affects society, and every film has a hero. And they don't seem to be affecting society. I don't see people getting up and really saving damsels in distress. And, so it's not that. What Mr. Benegal said is absolutely right. You are functioning in a patriarchy. It is very skewed because a lot of the female filmmakers or choreographers and people I work with, they are also, and so am I, and so is everybody. We are all part of and all products of this patriarchy. So suddenly, even they have kind of adopted the male gaze. It's like the women in politics. Why are Mamata Banerjee or Sushma Swaraj making random statements? Because they are competing with the men. They don't want to be feminine. They don't want to be out there saying, oh, then I will be weak. I can do this, I can make that blockbuster. And if that means I'm going to have somebody and I'm going to shoot a cabaret with this chick, I'm going to do it. Because that's what the men are doing. So it's very important to be able to retain your gaze. And as a woman, I think I may not have succeeded at every time, but I've been very aware of certain things while I'm making my movie. Like it's a cliche thing. Like you have Katrina Kaif, and there are 3 guys, and they see her on a beach, and one of them goes up, and they like what they see, and one of them goes up and asks her out, and she says, no, you can shoot this in 500 different ways. Do I want to see Katrina? I mean, it's film, it's a camera. What is objectification is when I don't see her as a person. I see parts of her. You know, I suddenly make her, I fragment her body. I make her like, so I look at it from the male gaze. I can see a woman walking out of the water in a bikini and she's totally dry. I've seen this on many films with full makeup on. And there's music going dead, and you know, what are you saying? And you're panning the camera up her body. You want me to look at her body, you know, because you're not finding any other way to say this woman's attractive. That is the male gaze. I'm seeing her through the actor's viewpoint. And so that's where you come in, as I think as a female filmmaker. It's like, I don't need her in a bikini. In fact, she's covered, like she's in a strappy dress till her feet. You know, she needn't be. He goes and speaks to her. And she says, no, I don't want to have a drink with you. And he's like, okay, that's that. So, I mean, it's stuff like that. There was a character, Spanish girl, that Farhan sleeps with in the film, Imran. He meets her, they hit on each other that night. I mean, he cheekily asks her if he can enter the shower with her. She says yes, and in the night they hook up. And to me it was very important because I know Indian men, and I know anyway they think that every Caucasian woman is loose and is going to sleep with them. I don't know why, but they think this. So it was very, very important the next day for them to have a scene, to make it about, just take away the sex from it and make it about him talking and speaking in different languages and still connecting. You know, having a person-to-person connection and retaining this human being that's there and is tender, and it's not just about a sexual connection, which actually it could just be about. But you have to be aware of what you're putting out there. And I think being female, I'm a little aware of those things with women in my film. But I'm sure I might screw up as well. I don't know.
Just tell me, I think you've been very honest as far as this is concerned, but looking at your first film, which actually did very well as far as your the critics are concerned, though it didn't do very well in the box office, would you say that one of the reasons for that could have been that it was somewhere a kind of a woman as a protagonist? Is that the reason?
No, I don't think it's because it was a woman as a protagonist. Also because the film started with Sona Konkona and ended with her.
Yes.
But it wasn't her story. It was a story about two people. That film, I think we screwed up in the marketing of it. I don't think people knew what to make of that movie. I don't think there was a clear communication on what that film was about. For the layman audience. They want that huge stars for them to just come in anyway. And I think thematically, I think it was a little sophisticated.
Yes.
I mean, thematically, it was about success and failure and self-esteem. And I think...
and it was also about the fact that at the end, what you showed was, in spite of whatever happened, she was kind of, she had her place, and she was kind of seen as somebody who was pretty confident about what she's going to be doing. I mean, it wasn't as though she had broken down in the whole world. So I suppose, so that really is the point, which is that when you do that, there is this, perhaps there is a way in which the male audience is kind of picking it up and saying, oh, so it's not about the hero, it's about...
You know, I really honestly don't think that there was not really much of an audience only that went in. So I don't think the male audience was rejecting this film. I don't think they were there. So I think that there were other problems with it. I don't think that people had an issue that it was about a woman and her. No, I don't think so. Because the male character in the film is extremely dynamic and not very heroic, but at the same time sharp, smart, moving, manipulative, and juicy as a character. So if men went in there, and at least the men that I know that have seen it, not just the critics, but even other filmmakers and friends, and you know, subsequently, and for some reason it's really been pirated, this movie. I don't know why, but people have watched it, and I've never gotten this kind of feedback. So I don't think it's about that, honestly.
I'm going to take you back a bit to ask you that, you know, we are still talking about issues, and we are talking about the role of cinema and what it can do. And I'm going to take you back to, let's say, the Sujatas and the Bandinis. I know there is lots of young people over here who may not have seen the film, but I just want to take you back to just ask you this question that, in a certain way, those were successes. Those were successes in terms of what it was meant to be delivering, in terms of a certain kind of a box office. So what really do you think has changed? That why is it that a Bandini or a Sujata doesn't work anymore? Is it that the issues are over and we don't know how to deal with it?
It doesn't mean that it won't work. I mean, it would work, but you'd have to give it a different kind of form. It isn't, I mean, you see, after all, it's a question of with each generation you have a different way. You have a different way of telling a story. Your narrative styles change. So many things happen. So we are not talking about that because you can make a film like Sujata, it will still work. But it's a question of where do you place it, how do you place it, what are the contexts that you're going to give to it? Because at that time it worked with a certain kind of community. Now that kind of community today doesn't exist. The world has changed. People have changed. Society itself has changed in so many different ways. So each film has its own time. There are very few films that travel beyond their own time. Most films are like yesterday's newspapers, After today, it's gone. There's another film comes in place, and a film is a very short-lived thing normally.
But there are these classics which, even on television, people seem to be sure about, investing in those films.
That requires a fair amount of study to understand what is happening. Because for a long time, you never got to see anything that had happened in the past. Now, because DVD is coming, so many other things, and you can see so much on YouTube and all over the place. So it's a different thing. So we haven't quite figured out exactly how it is and how it fits into your world view, the old films. Mm. Some of it is, there's so many other things are happening, like you refer, they become points of reference now. Those points of reference didn't exist in the past. All that sort of thing is happening, which needs a much greater study. I wouldn't want to venture a comment on that or a generalization on that because I wouldn't be able to tell, seriously speaking. I may have views, but they're not important, really.
Zoya, I'm going to ask you this, which is, at the end of it, this is actually business. And so therefore, while we have expectations or there are activists who have expectations, but tell me something, given the fact that you had your first film, then you had to do the second film, and obviously there could have been some people who had some questions about how it's going to be commercially. So after all, it is business. So in this kind of a scenario where everybody is trying to recognize that ye hit hoga ki nahi, how do you actually go about doing, if not, meaningful cinema, at least some sensible cinema? What is the way to do it?
I don't know. I mean, I don't. I do what I can do. I see films that are just absolutely, completely brilliant and amazing and taut and effective and socially relevant, and I'm like, man, I don't have that. I can't write this. And then I see completely meaningless cinema, and I'm like, I can't write this either. So I'm doing what I do. And I don't try to be smart. I don't try to be clever. I do think about being commercial. I do think about it connecting. That could be in the fact that I have songs, my casting choices. So I will make certain compromises, but I will tell the story I want to tell, and I will tell it at the pace I want to say it at. But coming back to the discussion, I think the problem here is we don't have enough stories. We don't have female stories, and so the women, because they are never the main protagonist, they're always someone's sister, mother, wife, girlfriend, object of desire. The belly that's shaking in the item song, that's where they fit in because it's not their story. So after a point, they're not rounded at all. Right. So they are only in pigeonholed. And I mean, if you're not the main character, why should I care about your ambitions, your desires, your resolution in the film? It doesn't matter. You're not the main story. The main story is the man. Right. The hero.
Let me then ask this question to both of you, because we just had a television kind of a session.
Before that, you said it's, after all, a business.
Right.
Unfortunately, or fortunately, it's not just business. There's much more to film than just business. Because I believe there's more to film than business, which is why films have remained. Some films have remained from the past. There are classics. And they remained not because they were good business. Some of them were not. The point about it is like when you write a book. You can say writing books is a business, as it is. publishing is a business. But the fact is there are books and books. There are different kinds of books. They engage you in different ways. Films can engage you in so many different ways. It depends on the filmmaker. It's a choice that the filmmaker makes, because that is measured, and often it is something that you do with what your own personal ambitions might be and what you wish your life to be. On the basis of that, you will make choices. And the kind of choice you might make may be successful, it may not be successful. Because for me, making films is, yes, sure, I have to entertain people, otherwise how am I going to hold their attention? But I need to do a little more than that. I want them to be engaged. I want them to be engaged in ideas more than simply sitting there and passively accepting whatever I'm offering to them. I would like to get them to get some, leave some sense. Not always successful, but I want them to go back with some takeaway from the theater.
Right.
Now, that is an important aspect for me, and that is the point that you do when you go to look at an art exhibition, when you look at a painting. It's the same thing. When you listen to poetry, it's very similar. There's always some takeaway from it. If you don't have that takeaway, for myself, I don't believe it's useful to do at all. It's not worth.
I fully understand that from the man who's done Ankur and then Nishant, and you haven't stopped. I mean, Zubeda, and there is one more that is on his way. So, there are many more, Sardari Begum, etc. So, the point is that I realize that that's a point of view, but whereas the reason why I'm raising this particular point is because the first session that we've had, which is more about advertising, etc., somewhere, I don't even know whether advertising is art, but I think the whole problem about art being sponsored or, being paid for by somebody who's therefore looking for returns, and the point that you raised about, doing something that you believe in, how do you bridge that? Actually, that's the commercial cinema part, where commercial returns is such an important thing. How do you ensure that you will be able to do something that you believe in and get it across?
You make the film on your phone. You take a camera, buy it, and make your film. And if you want to make a film that you don't care if it makes a buck or not, then you shouldn't take that money from anyone else. It's a very, very expensive medium. And if you are going out there and taking that money from somebody who's not an artist, necessarily, who has no reason on this planet to spread your aesthetic over the world, they are not interested. So they are giving you the money, and they're giving you the money so because they see a reason. Yeah, they want to put something good out there, but they need to see it as a business proposition. That's what they do. But you have the option to not go down that route, to make it very small. You have the option to make it with nothing at all, and people do that all the time. You can load it up on the net. You have various platforms today, but that's a choice you have to make.
Right, so I'm going to now ask you a question for which I don't know if you have the answer, but when it comes to entertainment, and we just had the television segment just now, television is entertaining, cinema is meant to be entertainment. How do you see this divide, which is when it comes to the home, it is the housewife who's deciding, and therefore whatever is the content is meant to be the woman as a protagonist. Whether it's regressive or not, that debate is over and don't want to get into it. But I'm saying that that's a story over there. It's the same family which is perhaps going out to see the films, and there, if it's a completely different story, the woman cannot be the hero has to be the hero. So how do you see that difference? How is it that in the same country this kind of clear divide is always there?
Is there a clear divide? I don't think there is a clear
I also
divide.
don't think
I don't
so.
think there's a clear divide.
So how do you see that television, you don't have one story which is about a man?
Because they're not paying for it. They're not paying for it. And I refuse to believe that the woman is controlling the remote control, because if there was a cricket match, there's no chance kyunki Saas bhi kabhi bahu thi is going to be allowed to be playing. I don't buy that. Because the men are not in the house. They're going out to work.
That there are enough TRPs to indicate that some of the so-called premium cricket events haven't had those kind of viewership when GEC has been playing. So it's a point that you need to consider. So I know what you're saying, which is that when cricket is happening, the man takes over and snatches the remote away.
I'm just saying cricket. I just don't think that kind of. I don't think so. I think if there's one television in the house, I mean, if there's nothing else of any importance, yeah, maybe it can go on. Also, people are at home, they're watching it, it kind of fills your day up, you know. And I've seen women, I know my mom watches certain shows, their friends, they just like catatonic. And it's nonsense going on. It's absolute nonsense. And I mean, people keep talking to me about women and they're wearing no clothes on Indian cinema and they're naked and objectified, and then you look at television and they are like drag queens with full makeup and, you know, silk saris, and this is how they're roaming around in their house and fighting with each other.
In the
what
kitchen.
kind of, like, who are these people? So, I don't know. And I feel like men are paying and buying tickets, so it is a family decision.
Okay, so
if
somebody's buying
if you're
tickets. Okay,
spending
all
like
right.
2,000 rupees on a night out, then
Right.
it's the decision as to what film to watch. And
Right.
then, I mean, the big films are all the male stars, and the biggest female stars are working with the male stars because that's how they get money. You know, so it's all the same thing. So you'll go and watch that movie.
I don't think we have the time, but I think we'll have a chat about the fact that how Bhoomika came back for the third time. Perhaps there were enough women to come and watch it in the afternoons. There was a 12 noon show, which was really meant for housewives. Maybe those housewives are not there, they're going to office or whatever.
Those were days when there was no television.
Right.
There were also, you know, mass media wasn't kind of, I mean, electronic media simply didn't exist. Word of mouth was what happened. And it was the word of mouth that carried over a period of time. You see, historically, I must tell you something else that had happened. That film had got an adult certificate. Right. And getting an adult certificate in the 70s and 80s and so on meant that it was a film meant for males, male adults, not for women, not for families. And it took some time for that, the air to be cleared. And it was that what made the difference. Because in the beginning, when any A certificate, all young males, you know, would rush to see the film. And they'd leave promptly after 5 minutes because this was not the film they'd come to see. So that was what was happening, and it slowly changed. But today you don't have that because you simply don't get that kind of space and the time for it to develop. Because your promotions can either make or mar a film.
Yeah.
You know, and often what happens is everybody is thinking first weekend.
That's right.
And if the first weekend doesn't get you the kind of returns that you want, forget about the producer. Producer is the last one who comes into the picture. The exhibitor is going to kick you out of there. You know, so that's the problem.
Right.
So basically, it's a question of how you do it. So it's all eventually also an aspect of manipulating an audience.
Right.
Now you're talking about advertising. What is advertising doing? Our advertising is manipulating people's views about one thing, a particular product against another product, or one service against another. Both might be exactly the same, but the fact is, by manipulating people's views about something, you're going to get them to make the kind of choices they're supposed to make according to you. The same thing happens, but you know, when it comes to television, what's the difference? Eventually, it's all the same. Even with films, it's exactly the same. It's a process of how much can you manipulate? How easily can you manipulate? Those are the questions. Because sometimes the most dumb movies, I mean, I wouldn't waste 2 minutes of my time watching those films, but they're huge successes. How can you stop that from happening?
Right. So I'm going to ask you this question, though it's meant for him, but I'm going to ask you, which is, if you're really talking about, you know, this whole thing is about the woman as a protagonist, the women-centric films, etc., etc. We are basically talking about a Bhoomika, and of course, there are many more we could speak about from his library of great films. Let's talk about Bhoomika. Now let's talk about dirty pictures. So, both are in a way similar. So I'd like you to tell me whether they actually seem to be the same when it comes to addressing the woman.
I have seen Bhoomika when I was a kid and haven't seen it recently, so I cannot comment on it. Yeah. Whereas Dirty Picture comes, I mean, it's very strange to talk about a filmmaker's, like a contemporary's work, you know, when especially if
You know,
you're not
I'm asking
around.
this question. I know some of these things you cannot possibly speak because maybe it's not diplomatic to do so. The reason why I'm asking, and therefore just take the question the way it's meant to be, is because, you know, on one hand, people are saying, oh, wow, what a fantastic performance, and then others saying that, oh, we've had this debate in the morning, that's why it's fresh in my mind, that is that the kind of portrayal of woman, etc. And in some way, it is a woman-centric film. It is about her as a protagonist.
It is completely a
It is-
woman-centric film.
And there you have a Bhoomika, and this is also a dirty picture. And what I'm trying to relate back to is the role of the financer. So therefore, is it that the financer is there to finance a dirty picture and not a Bhoomika? That's really...
Yeah,
Shyam.
on a huge level, yes. Because, see, you have to see Dirty Picture. Dirty Picture comes in, firstly, it is a film about Silk Smitha. She's iconic. I mean, I've grown up in the 80s. She's iconic. Everybody knows her. And it's a juicy story. It's about a woman who's totally sexualized, who was completely huge. She created a space for herself in a very strange way, and everybody knew her. And she had this crazy life and ended up committing suicide. It's waiting to be made. Now, how it was made, what happened with it, what I think of the film, I don't think we should be discussing.
No, that's not the
But
issue.
yeah, but it is a story that is, if you can cast it right, very, very juicy and will get eyeballs because people know who this is, you know. I mean, there is a recall value immediately because you know this person and this person has a colorful life. It's a colorful character. So yes, it will be made.
Right. I'm going to...
There's another way of looking at that film, or that story, is that she is the ultimate victim of patriarchy.
Absolutely.
Basically, that's what the story is. So there's a difference. Like you were talking about, you know, the Bhoomika and this. You can't make a Bhoomika today in any case. It's not going to work. But with Bhoomika, the idea is she refused to allow herself to remain a victim.
Right.
She has to get out of her victimhood. You see, that's the difference is that, like, when you have the patriarchal system, in the patriarchal system, if the woman has to see her own shadow in the sun, she cannot possibly not get out of somebody else's shadow.
Right.
She has to. Now, to do that, that's a heroic act, according to me. And to me, that's the kind of story, that is the, what's the word? That is the essential, fundamental story that you will have to make of a woman. If you really are talking about a woman coming into her own in a patriarchal society. Otherwise, you have to attack it much more radically by saying, I refuse to accept this paradigm.
Absolutely. Am I allowed one last question? Because without that, I know they switch off the light, but without that, I wouldn't have... they'll switch off the light or whatever I'll say. Yeah, I know. Who knows? They'll switch off the AC, which is okay because it's very cold. This question, of course, has to be tackled. Otherwise, we don't complete everything, which is item number. You know, there's been this endless debate, and television has spoken a lot about it. You know, is it that it's actually something that is doing a very major negative, as a lot of people have said? How is it so different from the cabarets? Or is it that, it's a lyrics? Because again, me and my cousin Joy, we were discussing that Chargai Chargai Bichua is full of innuendos. I mean, why is it that Biri Jalaile is more than that? So what is it that's happened?
I think Biri Jalaile is fabulous. I think it's about a woman saying, light your cigarette from my fire in my belly. I think it's awesome. So it doesn't bother me at all. But Fevicol, I'm a piece of tandoori chicken, eat me with alcohol. That's a bit of a problem.
Right.
That doesn't
So is it the lyrics which is
No,
the
lyrics
issue?
are a problem.
Or is it just item number by itself? Because item number and cabaret is how
we've called it item number. It is. We've had these songs. I mean, women dancing or sexy songs or cabarets or whatever you want to call them throughout.
Sure.
I like them personally. I don't think that if you take item songs, it's going to change anything. It's not going to. It's like saying if you have item songs in films, you're asking for trouble. It's like telling me not to wear a miniskirt. I'm sorry. This is the item song. Doesn't mean you go and squeeze somebody's bum after you watch this film. I'm sorry. There's no this plus this doesn't equal to this.
Right.
Yeah. But I'm talking about in terms of actresses and being objectified. Yes, the way they are shot, the kind of lyrics, the kind of choreography, the kind of dance movements. Yeah, you can tell this is ugly. This is vulgar. This is not okay. This is somebody cheapening herself. And this is not needed. There is a clear difference, and it makes you uncomfortable or not. So but to ban item numbers, no, I don't think so.
I agree with that because, I personally find some of these dances quite unpleasant for myself. But that's a different matter. But
that's
I
your
would never
personal-
want it to
absolutely.
be banned because that's up to the
Right.
person who's making it
Right.
and the people who are executing it and also the audiences who are enjoying watching dances like that. But I personally don't. Because, it suddenly reminds me, it was like, I remember Meera Nair many years ago saying something very funny and quite delightful and to the point. She said, it's funny how in Hindi movies, you have all these people on the stage, fucking in the air. Saying, and
That's
what
a
kind of
dance move,
dancing
yes.
is this? So I always think of that as what is happening here.
Right.
Is this what kind of dance is this?
Right.
But it's more than that because it's a question of how you look at different body parts. That's the main thing.
Right.
And it's not just that, it's also, it's such a big cycle. Like you see these actresses, because they don't have that big role, because of popularity, they are falling over themselves to do item numbers. They're huge actresses. They do the item numbers, they get the dance shows, which equals to, and advertising and the cosmetic brands. They're making their money off advertising.
Sure.
They're not making that much money on movies. They're doing shows and they're doing commercials. That's where they're getting their cash from, and that they're getting through being popular doing this.
Right.
And in our industry, the men are falling over each other to be objectified. They just keep taking their clothes off, all the men.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be
Absolutely.
objectified. So
Absolutely.
how do you stop them?
Right. Last question, the answer to that could be yes or a no, and you also have the option of not answering. All this while we've been talking about these ads where, why did they show a little boy and why not the little girl? Tell me, as a filmmaker, with your sibling having made a very successful film, Dil Chahta Hai, what kind of pressures did you have coming after him?
Actually, publicly, yeah, and debuting-wise, I came after him, but I've come before him.
Okay.
Now, I know it and he knows this, so there's no pressure.
Okay.
Because whether it was, I'm a year older, I was working in film before him. I was, I went and studied abroad before him. When I came back, I was writing my script and he was like, I'm making my film, will you come work on it? So you know what I mean? So it was
Right.
like, so between us, there's nothing because, I've always been before him. Only.
all these things are a little bit external, like, oh, Farhan ne to bana li, so what are you going to do? Those kind of things. No, it's not so much an issue to do with it's all about the fact that we've just been discussing this whole thing about in everything, the politics is to show the son. And it's about the son is the casting for the family, whereas the daughter could be there. Thank you very much. I think I'm soon going to be hit by a bullet from Monica. I think we managed quite well, I hope. And if there are some questions, I hope I've asked all your questions, but I'm sure there are some more. Please.
There's always this thing in media talking that a female protagonist cannot reach a 100 crore club film. But I find that unfair comparison, or I think the women are not given equal chances because the most movies that make to that club or category are films like Son of Sardar or Dabang 2 and all that. And the women-oriented films tend to be very serious. And I don't think serious cinema has ever made to that category of 100 crore club. I think even the Barfi didn't make to that club.
Barfi was 120 crores.
Oh, okay, then I'm wrong in that category. But I mean, if there was a movie like, Daughter of Sardar or Dabang 3 with Kareena Kapoor, do you think that kind of a film would do? Because generally the mass market films are making 100 crore club these days.
I don't know, it sounds awful, yeah. Daughter of Sardar, I don't know.
Why not? I think it's great. Daughter
Son
of
of Sardar is being so hard to digest. I mean, I don't know.
I'm just saying, they say business-wise, you
No,
have
see,
to have
Dirty
mass-
Picture was plum. It was and it did a lot. It did very, very well, and it didn't hit 100. The point is, it's just getting bigger. The market's getting bigger, and in a year, a film like Dirty Picture would hit 100 because there would just be that many more screens. Just the economics of it. The point of the matter is that female-oriented films do not make that much money, and that is a worldwide truth. There will be one rare case or one thing, they just don't make that much money. And that is because men and women don't go out to see them. Now, why, we don't know, but this is how it is.
But is it because they're always serious? Or
We live in a patriarchal society.
no, but it is also because they're serious and tend to have some cause
No, they're not
attached to it.
serious. No,
that-
why? Dirty Picture's not, there has no cause. Fashion had no cause. Kahani doesn't have a cause. These films don't have causes. They're entertained. Heroine, it doesn't have any cause attached to it. It's not at all serious, actually. They're entertainers.
Any other question? We'll take that as the last one. I think that
No, I just a light little comment. Women-centered films will do well in Meghalaya. Meghalaya is the only part of India which is properly matriarchal.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Kerala maybe.